Dear friends, today we are going to talk about it's hard to say it, dry needling. The reason why it's hard to say has to do with the nature of dry needling as, something of a colonial, superiorist kind of attitude about other cultures and their sciences. But we're going to get to that in a moment, after we have done most of our talking. Dry needling started with discoveries or developments by a Dr. Janet Travell. She was an American female doctor. This is interesting because at that time female doctors were not, a lot around in the United States, because it was still quite a lot of a sexist country. Dr. Travell lived from 1901 to 1997. So at the end of her career, of course, her career was much more easy than at the beginning of her career. And she was inspired by her father, who also was a physician, and she followed basically in his footsteps. And she wrote a lot of articles, and her specialty became the study of myofascial pain. And she discovered that there are particular kind of trigger points that if you pressure them, the myofascial pain subsides. In effect, actually, she said the opposite. She said there are particular kind of problems in the physical body that are attributed to organs or to muscles or something like this, but actually is myofascial. And the myofascial sheet of your body is more like a sort of a glue kind of substance between the muscles and the muscles and the bones, which in massage are usually addressed. And then she found that through manipulation of particular kind of points, the radiation of these points triggers a release of tension. Some of them followed nerves, some of them followed the shape of the muscle, some were transferred between muscles, and so on and so on. And for physiotherapists and other healthcare workers, this was quite a revolutionary idea. And she found with other people that when you would inject certain kind of chemicals inside the trigger points, there would be a release, and they would have all kind of chemicals putting in there, and I will talk to you about that later. Here you see the list, because it's not interesting enough to mention them. But at a certain point she discovered, okay, if I just do needles in there, it also actually works. And of course in the meantime acupuncture was getting more popular in the West and in America, and as a result of that the idea of needles as a therapeutic tool were becoming more famous. And both the French and the Americans, they do a lot of innovative research on needles, based on the idea that they had no clue what the Chinese meant. And because they had no clue what the Chinese meant, because they didn't read Chinese, they didn't speak Chinese, they didn't have any Chinese doctors to explain them a lot, so they started to interpret the idea of acupuncture from a Western medical perspective. This has grown towards a movement where now every acupuncturist suffers from, namely that acupuncture should only be accepted within Western biological modalities, because Western medicine is superior in its understanding of things compared to non-Western cultural sciences, which is of course one of the things that the IOC Daoland program argues against usually. And this is also one of the reasons why I now talk about dry needling, because dry needling is not an unknown modality in acupuncture. It's not a new modality even. And my first awareness of this kind of treatment was, when was it? In the 1980s. I was studying Qigong at that time already for some time. And I had this request if I would like to take care of a Mongolian doctor. He was a traditional doctor and he was doing a particular kind of acupuncture. He was in the Netherlands to treat rich Russian, people, because most of his customers were Russian, and some better off Westerners were also being Dutch people, but also being treated by him. And I traveled with him from family to family, and we treated men, women for all kind of minor problems, basically. And minor problems, I will explain that later. Minor problems for pain issues. And he explained it to me, like in China this is called the a-shi acupuncture. In Mongolian also the same a-shi. And a-shi in Chinese means, ouch, this is it. So the treatment of the technique was, if you have a point which hurts when you put a needle in it, that's the one you need to have. He explained that in Mongolia on the steppes this kind of acupuncture, this kind of medicine was quite common, and people had sort of semi-specialized doctors. They developed particular kind of sensitivities, had a minimum understanding of Chinese medicine theory, and as a result of that they were able to treat people for a lot of different kind of problems that come about from cold, from humidity, from joint pain, and so on and so on. The things that you come across as a nomad. You know how it is, from when you were still a nomad yourself. Living on the street and on the bridges, you get pains. Of course, there's on the steppes under your horse or in the yurt. When I went to study Chinese medicine later, I wanted to have an official diploma for Chinese medicine, even though I already studied flying needle acupuncture with Shanrong Sun, and I studied this a-shi acupuncture. I was already treating a lot of people with acupuncture at that time, but I needed a diploma for official recognition. So I went to a TCM school, which basically applies 70% Western medicine and 30% of Chinese medicine. And when I came to China, I realized in China itself there is almost no Chinese medicine, because even the Chinese medicine universities, they only use herbs based on Western chemistry, or they use needles, primarily like dry needling. So they don't really study that deep, and their theory is based on herbal medicine, so it is not exactly right. The history of needling is interesting though, and then you see that a-shi techniques are the oldest acupuncture techniques there are, because acupuncture is rooted in massage. If you don't know how to massage, acupuncture actually is more like an intellectual thing, and in some parts of treatment you might have an understanding, but you don't understand the body, and as a result of that, and that is what you very often see with dry needling people and medical doctors who do acupuncture, is that they puncture, and they puncture too painful. This method of treating is in China called military acupuncture, military style of acupuncture. That means that you're, on purpose maybe even hurt somebody, and that is called, the hurt is called the de-qi, the arrival of the qi. And de-qi is very important because it's discussed in different Chinese medicine classics, but it is something that should come about naturally, like when you're meditating, you're sitting in meditation, and at a certain point you become bright on the inside, and your inner luminosity comes out as a result of the meditation. And this is de-qi experience from the meditation, the arrival of the qi. And that is the qi virtue actually flowering at that moment. So like in the alchemical classics, and they also are important for understanding Chinese medicine, you first have to have the jing flowering to be able to produce qi, and then you have to maintain the jing flowering to make sure that you can maintain the production of qi, and that's the perfection and the wellness of your body and of your body functions, of your organ functions. And then when the qi is good and it's flowering, then at that moment the shen can come about, and also of course the shen requires the qi to keep on flowering, and the shen, your awareness, but this is also your divinity, and therefore also your inner luminosity at the same time that has to go out. And at the moment when you put a needle in an acupuncture point, then basically also this inner luminosity has to develop. Of course most people are not sensitive enough to notice this inner luminosity, but as an acupuncturist you are supposed to have gone through the meditative training so that you can recognize Tai Chi. And this method is called the scholarly method, or the civil method in modern Chinese medicine. And it means that the needles are being put in a careful way to send signals into the body without hurting the body and trying to avoid hurting, other than through the pathogenics, which are, prone to cause pain when you puncture the body. But in massage, primarily, you massage the structures of the body, the yang structures, the yin structures, depending on what you do, the points, the channels, the muscles, the muscle channels, or the regular channels. Like in shiatsu, you do a military style of that, and you follow fixed formulas, or like in the tuina and in the ammo, you follow more improvised methods based on whatever you come across in somebody's body. This is what we do in the IOC Daoland, in the mobilization massage technique, which is basically battlefield massage. You can say a sort of triage, where you investigate a person and at the same time make corrections at the same time. That's typical for tuina, and acupuncture functions more or less according to the same lines. And this is where the massage is changing gradually from using your hands as tools to using sticks and bones and stones to puncture particular kind of points, and later on, when they had more sharp things, also making cuts to release blood, to reduce pressure or heat or something like this. And then gradually over time, because of metallurgic influences, the needles become better. You have more variations in knives and spears and cutters and so on. And as a result of these changes, you gradually have an instrumentarium, which in essence still is massage. And for almost all the techniques throughout the early history of acupuncture, a-shi technique was the way to go, because you are basically massaging a person, and at the moment when you find a sensitive spot, you put a needle in there, or you let go of blood, depending on the nature of the sensitive spot, of course. Simple, right? And at the moment when you look at it from that simple perspective, then you can see, okay, dry needling in that sense is only a modern incarnation of that technique, except what is missing is, depending of course on the individual therapist, a real understanding of the Chinese body according to the Chinese medicine theory. So that means that as far as the Chinese medicine theory understands these kind of things. a-shi techniques, and also of course in that sense dry needling techniques, they are primarily using musculoskeletal problems. That means things that have to do with pain or stiffness or mobility or something like this. And as such, it is used for revalidation very often. And you see that people, when they have pain, they go to a physiotherapist, and then the physiotherapist gives them dry needling without any understanding of how the acupuncture actually works. And they have all kind of ideas, and like the theory of Dr. Travel about myofascular pain is then usually used. I remember when I was still member of the EuroTCM, there were several Chinese medicine doctors, Westerners usually, that did deviate from the main in Western medicine, Western Chinese medicine, either being medical or being esoteric or spiritual even, but they were moving towards this myofascial thing, because at that moment that became like a hot thing. Like you can see from the 2010s or something like this, you have this explosion of dry needlers because they saw all their clients run away from their clinic because physiotherapeutic work in general didn't provide enough results to keep clients, and insurance companies didn't want to invest money enough in these kind of workers, so that in many countries physiotherapists and related therapies they became, well, less insurable as a result of that. In essence, you can say that the physiotherapists, they try to incorporate an acupuncture which is undressed. So they use the tools, but they don't use the methods and the philosophy and the approach. So they don't have a whole body approach. They basically use the dry needling for local treatment, and local treatment is important. But acupuncturists usually, orthodox acupuncturists like me, they usually point out if you don't understand what is the result on the long term or more deep into the system of the body, you might actually create a new problem. So you have to always be very careful with trigger point treatment. So you have to first make an assessment of the whole body before you can actually give proper treatment. So in that sense, trigger point acupuncture from Chinese medicine perspective is indispensable as a part of massage, and massage is indispensable for trigger point acupuncture. That means they are interdependent. So massage, triage and needles, they come as one package. And this is what we try to do at the basis of our Chinese medicine course at IOC Daoland theme. What they found though when they were treating these kind of things in a westernized fashion is that the treatment works for a lot of different kind of problems to relieve clients. In China they did research on a military style of acupuncture, and they said, okay, pain-related musculoskeletal complaints, they were treated and usually had about 53% success rate in resolving the problem, and with arthritis about 41%. That's quite a lot. Neurological complaints like post-stroke rehabilitation and so on, facial paralysis had a 23% success rate, weight loss 10%, and at this moment you can see that in countries like the UK, in the Netherlands, and the United States and France and so on, acupuncture becomes more and more normal in pain treatment. And at this moment, like in the UK, some research came out in 2013, I think, and they said that about 84% of all pain treatment is already treated with acupuncture needles. The advantages of using acupuncture are pretty good documented. There's a lot of textbooks, and I just like to point you out one in my own shelf. This is a little bit older one, and this one shows research in acupuncture exhibition. It's made in China, and it has something like, I don't know, 1200 pages of research to take from. I use this as a foundation for my studies and my clinics, because almost every issue that you can come across is being discussed. Of course, it is all being discussed in the shape of Western medicine, of course, Western chemistry, Western neurology, and so on and so on. Almost nobody ever discusses things in a scientific way from a Chinese medicine perspective, and that's a pity for Chinese medicine, of course, as a whole. So I remember, as a result of the discussion about dry needling with my colleague in Greece, Vita Rivelli, that we would take the T out of TCM in our clinics and only call it Chinese medicine to make a difference with what's happening in China. It is difficult enough to disconnect yourself from your own culture, especially because of your word use. And so in our program, in the Daoland program, we pay a lot of attention to that, in how you basically purify yourself from westernized language, so that you can slowly grow into the understanding of the concepts of Chinese medicine. Ironic for dry needling, I told you acupuncture is part of massage, so in itself it is not a standalone technique. An acupuncture without a massage, without one way or the other manipulating the body here or there, is usually much less effective than when you do. When you are doing dry needling, then usually it is used as an additive technique, like ear acupuncture is very often used by Western esoteric practitioners as a sort of reflex zone for treating the whole body. And at a certain point, reaches these kind of things, they reach a sort of superstitious level in their effectiveness, and it's difficult to prove the quality or the truthfulness of these kind of techniques. Dry needling is named in many different kind of ways in Western sources. And for instance, in 2009 there was an article written by Dr. White, Professor White, and he defines dry needling as Western medical acupuncture. And he says it's a therapeutic modality involving the insertion of fine needles. It's an adaptation of Chinese acupuncture using current knowledge of anatomy, physiology and pathology and the principles of evidence-based medicine. Well, this evidence-based is based on statistics, and of course we know that statistics can be manipulated very easily to prove whatever you like. Then there is this other thing which is missed by basically everybody, is that the needles that we nowadays use in acupuncture, these are called filigree needles because they're very thin. These are a Japanese invention from the 70s, and they have become more popular. And when I started studying in China, they were still using the Chinese filigree copy, which were much thicker, and they still had to be cleaned. They were an industrial needle, but they were not strong enough, and they would sometimes break. And that means that every needle, because of its cleaning process, probably would be used like 100 times for every client. And you needed to learn all kind of techniques. But nowadays the needles are very thin, but the thinness also goes at the expense of something else, because the idea of acupuncture is not so much that you treat energy, but it's about treating qi and blood, and that you influence the shun, and that you help develop the jing. For the jing, of course, you need to exercise. And at the moment when your jing is developing and your awareness is developing and your qi is developing, then health comes about, of course. So that is in itself, it's a pretty simple process, and it is this lack of understanding of the scientific coherence of Chinese medicine that causes people to fragment parts of Chinese medicine. Say like, oh, I do qigong, I do acupuncture, I do massage, I do herbal medicine, I do cupping, I do moxa, and so on and so forth, which fails to understand that all these things are the same. When I practice Tai Chi Chuan, I use the same techniques that I use in massage or in acupuncture or in meditation, and so on and so on. So all these techniques, they're all interrelated, and the principles are the same. And the learning of these principles, which in Neo-Confucianism were called Tai Chi, namely the polarization of forces to have something done with a minimum of effect, a minimum of work with a maximum of effect, of course, is very important. Anyway, this White made this kind of definition, and the result of Westerners thinking about it is that people don't anymore listen to simplified experiential and evidence-based concepts like yin-yang, wu-xing, and so forth and so forth. So they have to learn all kind of complicated chemical things which are improvable. For instance, in a cell is already so complicated and so complex. By defining one or two chemicals as cause for a problem, that this one chemical has to influence thousands of other chemicals. So that is, of course, a homeopathic wishful thinking. Not saying anything against homeopathy, in case you really like homeopathy, but homeopathy is based on a very simple principle. But Western medicine is doing homeopathic thinking in the sense that they think like with a minimum of knowledge you can understand the whole body and then treat people. This is not meant as a rant, this is just based on scientific, evidence-based research of Western medicine. And clients, of course. In 2013 there was another paper, a book actually, written by Hong, Professor Hong, and he describes as acupuncture, how do you say it? Covering a diverse academic fields, which starts from ancient history but then is expanded in modern medical therapies, like neurophysiology and so on. And he says it includes all kind of aspects of complex interaction, like having empathy with your client, the way how you touch, your intention, your attention, so your expectation, and also conditioning of the body and of the person and of the therapist. So the the chemicals. Oh, there, I will put it in a line before, so I don't need to do that. I can just cut this out. The irony is that people like me, who are more or less looking for the orthodox theories of Chinese medicine, we feel very often that dry needlers, because of the lack of actual training that they go through and the lack of coherent theory and understanding of the human body and the treatment methods, they are infringing on our therapeutic rights. When we do that, we make a medical claim, then we can go to jail for that in many countries. When they do that, they get a reward and they get preference by insurance companies. So these kind of things, they are annoying, you can say. And I use nowadays dry needling as a mention because people really think dry needling is something else than acupuncture. And the only difference is that dry needling is based on not understanding, a lack of theory basically of how the body works and how the acupuncture itself works. Like I said before, as an acupuncturist, you know that if you, for instance, puncture in the shoulder blades, you might, for instance, affect the heart and cause a heart problem, or you might, for RSI, use it on the arm and then by accident cause somebody to have intestinal problems. All these kind of things is possible, so you have to understand how these kind of things work. And this is basically the reason why I make this movie, to help you understand your choice in Chinese medicine and dry needling. You have to understand that there are at this point 3 different kinds of acupuncture. That's the medical acupuncture, there's the esoteric acupuncture, this is what most Westerners do when they talk about energy and so on. And then there is the Chinese medicine. The medical acupuncture is influencing deeply the Chinese TCM, what they call TCM. In China, of course, called Zhongyi, and Zhongyi just means Chinese medicine. But it is, really for a large percentage, it's just Western biomedicine and allopathic medicine ideas, disease theories, chemistry, and so on and so on. And Chinese medicine, in that sense, is based on the conglomerate of ideas and practices that are from ancient times. And it is very difficult to make that claim that you are doing actual, really authentic Chinese medicine. And I remember when I was working for Chaoyang University, the one that is now involved in the scandal about the plague in China. When I was working for them, then at that time, the issue came up because of the World Heritage Foundation recognition of acupuncture as World Heritage. So in one of the first meetings that they held about this, I was present with the top tiers of decision makers in Chinese medicine in China, and these were basically like, what are you going to do? Because we spent, as Communist Party, we spent 70 years of destroying Chinese medicine and trying to westernize it and modernize it. And now there's this recognition of Chinese medicine, acupuncture especially, as an authentic thing. So it has to be restored in its authentic format. We have to be able to offer that. And we don't know the science anymore. And that's actually the reason why I was in that meeting, because at that moment, as a Taoist, I was recognized as an authority in that sense. The irony is that in Beijing you have a Taoist monastery, Baiyangguan, where I used to come. The people who work there as part of the Taoist medicine clinic in the monastery, they're all from the Chinese medicine government, and they have now modernized a little bit to appear more Taoist by including some exercises which are sanctioned by the government. But they are far from the idea of Taoist medicine in that sense. And Taoist medicine, in essence, is the foundation of what we now call Chinese medicine. And don't make a mistake, there's tantric elements in there, there's Buddhist elements in there, Vajrayana, Mahayana, Dhyana is not so very present in China, so you can leave it out. But there's also some shamanic elements in there, there's ritualist elements in there, and all kind of other aspects. that can be included. So what I propose is that you tell me what you think about this interaction with dry needling and acupuncture. What do you think is the benefit that physiotherapists and acupuncturists seem to do separate things? Because I do a-shi acupuncture quite frequently, and because many problems that people face are basically a-shable. That is really very funny.